It started like so many headlines do now, quiet, then viral. A side comment from Melania Trump, delivered at a private fundraiser in Palm Beach, leaked within hours like a crack in glass spreading across the internet. She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. Just a carefully worded jab wrapped in elegance, cloaked in plausible deniability. "We must be careful not to celebrate leaders just because they speak well," she said with a knowing smile. "Real leadership isn't charm, it's results, and history will remember who gave us speeches and who gave us strength." The room chuckled. Cameras weren't rolling, but donors were recording, and within minutes it was everywhere. The implication wasn't subtle. She didn't mention Barack Obama by name, but she didn't have to. The subtext was loud. Barack's presidency was style, not substance. His legacy, overhyped, inflated, maybe even fraudulent. It didn't take long for the outrage to light up. Social media erupted. Hashtags began to trend. Melania who and Obama built this climbed the charts. Analysts on cable news dissected the comment with surgical precision. Was this a return to birther-era dog whistles? A calculated shot from someone who'd stayed mostly silent until now? Some called it shade, others sabotage, but no one expected what came next. Just 24 hours later, at a college commencement in Chicago, Barack Obama took the stage. He wore that familiar half-smile, the one that says, "I've been here before and I'm still standing." No direct response. No call-out, just a story. He spoke of his mother, who raised him to believe that words matter. He spoke of how dignity doesn't trend, and how leadership isn't measured by volume, but by vision. Then, with a pause that filled the silence like thunderclouds waiting to burst, he said, "History doesn't remember noise, it remembers purpose." The crowd rose to its feet, not in applause, in reverence. Barack hadn't just answered, he dismantled the entire premise. No insults, no anger, just truth, steady, sharpened like glass. But what Barack said next didn't just shut her down, it ignited something no one expected. For years, Melania Trump played the role of the reluctant icon, statuesque, reserved, unbothered by the noise that swirled around her husband's storm of a presidency. She rarely spoke, and when she did, it was controlled, measured, designed for minimum ripples. She wasn't the firebrand, she was the frost. But silence isn't absence, and in politics, silence can be strategy. Because when Melania finally did speak, when she chose her words that night in Palm Beach, she wasn't just making a casual observation about leadership. She was issuing a challenge, not just to Barack Obama, but to the memory of him, to what he represents in the minds of millions, to what his very presence in the White House once symbolized for Black children, immigrant families, and working-class dreamers across America. That's what made the remark land with such weight. She wasn't attacking the man, she was chiseling at the monument. And the timing was no accident. Since leaving the White House, Barack Obama has remained one of the most admired figures in global politics. His approval ratings soar above partisanship. He's become a voice of reason in an era defined by division. And as Trump's influence begins to wane under the weight of investigations and infighting, the narrative war has intensified. The right doesn't just want to win the next election, it wants to rewrite the last chapter. Melania's words were a spark, but the kind that lights signal flares. Because here was the former First Lady, once positioned as apolitical, apersonal, taking a side in history's ongoing trial. And not just any side. She chose to align with the undercurrents of erasure, of revision, of silencing stories that made people believe they finally belonged. Her comment struck at something deeper than partisanship. It touched the nerve of those who still remember crying when Obama was elected, who remember watching their kids draw his face in crayon, who remember thinking, maybe now we matter. And now, that legacy, that feeling was being dismissed as charm. It was a gut punch wrapped in pearls. But here's what the Melanias of the world often underestimate. Hope doesn't die quietly. It remembers, it resists, it responds. That's why the backlash was immediate and electric. Because the fight isn't over who speaks better, it's over who gets to speak at all. It's not about decorum, it's about dignity. And in that fight, even the seemingly apolitical become warriors. But Melania's move wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't a one-time slip. It was part of a larger pattern, a quiet campaign to recast history in softer hues, to downplay the darker truths of the Trump era while dimming the brilliance of what came before. And it wouldn't be the first time Melania tried to rewrite the narrative. Melania Trump has always been a mystery draped in designer fabric. She didn't yell. She didn't tweet. She didn't need to. Her power was different, colder, quieter, more curated. While Donald Trump's presidency roared with chaos and scandal, Melania floated above it all, serene and untouchable, like a statue in the eye of a hurricane. But silence is never neutral, and in Melania's case, it wasn't just silence, it was strategy. From the beginning, she styled herself as the reluctant First Lady. When Michelle Obama lit up the national stage with speeches, causes, and raw emotion, Melania seemed to retreat. But in that retreat, she crafted something even more potent, a brand of icy elegance. She wasn't there to inspire, she was there to endure. And yet behind that veil of detachment lay sharp edges. It began with a speech, her first major appearance during the 2016 Republican National Convention. The world watched, surprised by the poise and then stunned by the plagiarism. Whole lines lifted from Michelle Obama's 2008 DNC speech. Same words, same rhythm, same hope repackaged without credit. It wasn't just embarrassing. It was symbolic, a copy of grace without the authenticity. The Trump camp brushed it off. She was new to politics. It was a mistake. But the message had already been sent, imitation as strategy, silence as shield. Then came Be Best. Touted as her signature initiative, it aimed to tackle cyberbullying, opioid abuse, and the well-being of children. But the contradiction was glaring. Her husband, the nation's most notorious online bully, was lobbing insults at everyone from war heroes to school shooting survivors. And there was Melania, asking America's youth to rise above the fray, while dining nightly with its architect. When children were torn from their families at the southern border, Melania boarded a plane to visit the detention centers. The world waited to see the human side of the White House. Instead, she arrived wearing a jacket. On the back, bold white letters asked, "I really don't care, do you?" She later claimed it was just a jacket, but the country saw a message and it was chilling. Throughout her tenure, Melania never publicly challenged her husband's most hateful rhetoric. Not when he reignited birther conspiracies about Barack Obama. Not when he downplayed white nationalism. Not when he mocked disabled reporters, smeared immigrants, or demonized protesters. Melania remained silent, and her silence echoed. It wasn't passive, it was permission. In interviews, she defended him. In appearances, she stood beside him. And in moments when the country begged for decency, she gave them detachment. The truth is, Melania Trump didn't need to yell to leave a mark. She was the architect of plausible deniability. She turned being uninvolved into being untouchable. Critics couldn't accuse her of saying something terrible because she rarely said anything at all. But power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It tilts the scale behind the curtain. It nods at the right moment. It wears couture while policies burn. Melania was not the storm. She was the silence that let it rage. And that's what made her so effective. She could sit beside cruelty and emerge unscathed. She could echo conspiracy without ever saying the words. She was the perfect mirror for a movement built on revision and erasure, elegant, aloof, untouchable. When she took that jab at Obama, it wasn't a slip. It was consistent with her quiet campaign, diminish the symbols that challenged their reign. Rewrite history with elegance, erase empathy with a smile. She had never been loud, she never had to be. But while Melania curated control, Barack was learning to master the power of restraint. Before the spotlight, before the seal of the presidency, before the chance of "yes, we can," there was a boy named Bari. Born in Hawaii to a Kenyan father and a white mother from Kansas, Barack Obama entered the world as a contradiction America wasn't yet ready to understand, and that made him a mirror for a nation still grappling with its identity. He grew up between worlds. In Indonesia, where he lived with his mother and stepfather, he learned how quickly power can turn violent. In Hawaii, raised by his white grandparents, he discovered how silence often fills the space where belonging should be. He was too black for some, too foreign for others, too thoughtful in a culture that rewarded noise. But it was that friction, that ache, that shaped him. Barack didn't inherit power, he built purpose, brick by brick, book by book. He worked as a community organizer on the south side of Chicago, earning pennies to walk streets most politicians would never visit. He listened. He helped residents fight for heat in their apartments. He showed up in rooms no one powerful ever entered, and he didn't come to be seen. He came to serve. Then came Harvard Law, not just attending but leading the first black president of the Harvard Law Review. The headlines wrote history, but Barack wasn't chasing history. He was chasing impact. He married Michelle, another force forged in struggle and brilliance, and together they built a family, a life, a vision. They didn't inherit legacy. They became legacy. By the time he ran for Senate, many still didn't see him coming. Too untested, too eloquent, too idealistic. But then came the 2004 Democratic National Convention. One speech, one night, and suddenly America saw itself in a new reflection, one that looked forward, not back. He spoke of one America, not red or blue, but hopeful, hungry for change. And 4 years later, they handed him the keys to a country on fire, a financial collapse, 2 wars, a shattered global image. He didn't scream. He didn't scapegoat. He steadied the wheel. But Barack Obama was never just a president. He was a cultural reckoning. He was the living, breathing rejection of the lie that only certain people belong in the highest rooms of power. To children with names that teachers mispronounced, to sons of immigrants, to daughters with skin tones that had been politicized, he wasn't just a man. He was proof. He made intelligence aspirational. He made calm powerful. He made empathy presidential. And for 8 years, he led not with vengeance but with vision. He gave us healthcare reform that saved lives. He navigated the global economy back from the brink. He lit the White House in rainbow colors after marriage equality. He sang Amazing Grace at a black church after a massacre. He wept for children lost to bullets when others offered only thoughts and prayers. But perhaps his greatest achievement wasn't policy, it was emotional gravity. He carried the hopes of generations who were told they'd never see someone like him lead this nation. And he did it while walking a political tightrope stretched over centuries of scrutiny. Every word measured, every gesture dissected, every smile weaponized or worshipped. And through it all, he never cracked. He read the Constitution like scripture. He quoted Baldwin. He referenced Jay-Z. He was equally fluent in Langston Hughes and LeBron James. And yet he was never immune. The birther attacks, fueled by the very man who would succeed him, tried to strip him of legitimacy. The questions about his faith, his patriotism, his heritage, they weren't policy critiques. They were existential assaults. But Barack knew the weight of restraint. He knew that answering every insult wasn't strength, it was surrender. So he picked his moments, chose silence as a scalpel, used words as windows, and when he did speak, the world listened. Because he wasn't just speaking for himself. He was speaking for every person who had ever been told they were too different, too foreign, too other to lead. That's why Melania's comment struck a nerve. It wasn't just a dig at him. It was a reminder that even now, even after 2 terms, a Nobel Prize, and global reverence, there are still those eager to reduce him to a symbol of style. They can't argue with his legacy, so they try to diminish it. But Barack Obama wasn't built in comfort. He was forged in fire, sharpened by scrutiny, raised on hope. So when the insult finally came, thinly veiled but unmistakable, he didn't flinch. He leaned in. It was a single line, easy to miss, delivered at a closed-door gala with crystal chandeliers and silent phone cameras. Melania stood beside a gold-draped podium, smiling in that way she always did, practiced, distant, unbothered. She was thanking donors, praising true leadership when she pivoted. America must look past pretty speeches and polished smiles, she said, her accent flattening the edges of the words. Leadership is not about charisma, it is about courage in difficult times, real courage. She let the silence stretch, then she moved on. No name, no finger pointed, but the room knew, and so did the phones that had quietly captured it all. By midnight, the clip was in the bloodstream of the internet. A few fringe accounts posted it first, MAGA loyalists and culture war influencers tagging it with hashtags like style over substance and real leadership. But it didn't stay fringe for long. By dawn, Fox News had turned it into a chyron. Melania's warning, substance over showmanship. Then came the talking heads. She's clearly referring to the Obama years, one host said, grinning. She's right, 8 years of speeches and selfies, said another. Finally, someone had the guts to say it out loud. The phrase, pretty speeches, was repeated like a chant. Clips of Obama at past rallies smiling, laughing, connecting were juxtaposed with Melania's stoic delivery. It wasn't analysis, it was performance. And just like that, the whisper became a war cry. Twitter ignited. Liberals called it a cheap shot. Conservatives framed it as truth to power. Hashtags flared. Melania Shade, Obama Legacy, We Remember Hope. Screens filled with side-by-side images of Barack rallying crowds and Melania in that now infamous I really don't care jacket. Commentators debated whether the remark was strategic or accidental. Was it spontaneous shade or a coordinated message? Some said it was Melania's attempt to stake relevance in a post-Trump world. Others argued it was a subtle call to erase Obama's moral clarity from the cultural conversation. But under all the noise, one question pulsed through every headline. Would Barack respond? His office said nothing. No tweets, no press statement, just silence. That silence became its own story. CNN ran a segment titled Obama's Strategic Patience. MSNBC aired a countdown. Day 2 without response. Even late-night hosts joked, Barack's probably crafting a comeback so classy it'll need its own library wing. Behind closed doors, his advisors debated. Some wanted a response. Others warned it would only elevate the moment. But Barack stayed still not out of fear, but out of calculation. Because he knew. He knew that in moments like this, timing is the blade. Say too much, too fast, and you look defensive. Wait too long, and they rewrite the truth. So he watched the fire build. He watched the country talk about style as if it disqualified substance. He watched the same voices that once questioned his birth now question his worth again. And he waited until the moment was right. And when he finally spoke, the room fell silent. The stage was modest, not a stadium, not a primetime address, just a university auditorium in Atlanta. Students filled every seat, faculty lined the aisles, and cameras quietly took their places. It was meant to be a commencement, a celebration of youth and possibility, but the room buzzed with another energy anticipation. Everyone knew. This wasn't going to be just another speech. Barack Obama walked to the podium with that slow, unbothered stride. Navy suit, open collar, no teleprompter, just a few note cards tucked neatly into his hand. He began like he always did, soft-spoken, intimate, pulling the room in. You know, he said, scanning the sea of young faces, there was a time when someone who looked like me couldn't have walked onto a campus like this, let alone speak from a stage like this. A pause. Some folks like to forget that. The audience murmured, then fell quiet again. I've heard some commentary lately, he continued, letting the words settle. Commentary about charisma, about speeches, about style. There it was, no names, no direct hit, but every ear in the room perked. He had entered the ring on his own terms. And I want to be real clear, he said, his voice tightening. Words matter. He leaned forward. Because words can start wars. Words can build bridges. Words can lift a child up or silence them forever. Applause thundered through the auditorium. A few students stood. Faculty nodded, hands clasped. Obama waited. But more than that, he said, now calm again. Words are how we remember, how we record our truths, how we choose to tell the story of this country. He looked up, eyes steady. So when someone tells you that speaking with passion is weakness, when they tell you that articulating your dreams is less valuable than barking orders, I want you to remember this. He paused, letting the silence stretch into reverence. Martin Luther King didn't pick up a sword. He picked up a microphone. The room erupted. Fannie Lou Hamer didn't need a title. She had a voice. Another wave of cheers. And some of us, we had to learn to use ours just to survive. He let the applause rise, then slowly, gently brought it back down. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon. I didn't have my name on buildings. I had books. I had a mother who worked nights. I had teachers who told me I mattered. A nod to every working-class parent, every underdog. I ran for office because I still believe that public service is about more than power. It's about purpose. Then he turned, not literally, but tonally. The warmth in his voice cooled just enough. And over the years, some folks have tried to reduce that to charisma, to speeches, to style. He paused. Style, he repeated, lifting an eyebrow. Soft laughter bubbled up from the front rows. Well, I'll tell you this, if dignity is a style, I'll wear it. If decency is a performance, I'll keep showing up. And if giving young people hope makes me a showman, he smiled. Then let the show go on. The room exploded. Students shouted, professors clapped. A camera shook from the weight of the roar. Obama raised his hand slightly, gently reeling the energy back in. "Because this isn't about me," he said, quieter now. "It's about what we believe in." The crowd leaned forward. "It's about whether we teach our kids that strength is cruelty or compassion, whether leadership is fear or vision, whether history is something we revise or something we honor." He looked out over the crowd, not speaking for a full beat. "I've made mistakes, I've learned, I've grown. But one thing I've never done and will never do is tear someone down for daring to believe in something better." The applause didn't wait. It surged like a wave, rhythmic, proud, defiant. In that moment, Melania's comment, the dig, the insinuation, the smear melted into irrelevance. Not because Barack denied it, but because he transcended it. He didn't insult her, he didn't name her, he did something more devastating. He held up a mirror. And what stared back wasn't just her reflection, it was the reflection of every small, petty attempt to silence truth with cynicism. As the crowd gave him a standing ovation, some wiping tears, others chanting his name, it became clear. This wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a resurrection. He had reminded America who he was, who we were. He had answered pettiness with poetry. He had answered erasure with memory. He had answered noise with purpose. And the country didn't just hear it, they felt it. By the time the applause died down in that Atlanta auditorium, the internet was already ablaze. The clip hit Twitter before Obama even stepped off stage. Grainy phone footage at first, then high-definition cuts, then stitched TikTok remixes layered with gospel choirs and Kendrick Lamar tracks. His words, "If dignity is a style, I'll wear it," flashed across every screen. Phones lit up. Feeds refreshed. America was no longer just watching, it was testifying. Within hours, #Obama Truth trended at #1. Silent No More wasn't far behind. Influencers with millions of followers reposted the speech in full. Civil rights leaders quoted it. School teachers printed it out. Even Gen Z, notoriously allergic to politics as usual, found in his message a kind of fire they hadn't seen in years. TikTok teens who'd never voted edited Obama's lines over anime fight scenes and slow-motion slam dunks. One video alone got 12 million views in 6 hours. It wasn't just a response, it was a resurrection. News anchors struggled to keep up. CNN called it the comeback moment of a political lifetime. MSNBC ran it under the chyron. Obama redefines leadership again. Even Fox News, caught off guard, offered only muted commentary. One host paused mid-segment, clearly rattled, then muttered, "Well, he does know how to land a punch." The ripple effects hit every corner of culture. Stephen Colbert opened his monologue that night with, "I guess Melania forgot that Obama doesn't clap back, he rewrites the soundtrack." Saturday Night Live aired an emergency cold open. The sketch was simple. Melania watching the speech on loop in silence, pouring tea, as the volume of the crowd outside her window rose and rose. Even former Republican strategists, the so-called never-Trumpers, weighed in. "He reminded the nation what presidential sounds like," tweeted one. "We've missed it more than we realized." And then came the polls. Within 3 days, public trust in Obama's legacy rose 11 points among independents. A week later, donations to civic education nonprofits tripled, most tagged with the hashtag #ForTheNextObama. What Melania intended as a quiet character cut had become a nationwide rally for truth, for style with substance, for leadership with heart. But it didn't stop at admiration. Something deeper was shifting. Young people began organizing community screenings of his speech in school gyms and public libraries. One teacher in Minneapolis said students who never spoke in class started quoting him during a discussion on leadership. Another in El Paso reported that 2 immigrant students asked to memorize the speech as part of their ESL project. Because that was the difference. Obama's words didn't just win the moment. They reawakened something collective, something cultural, something spiritual. In barbershops, beauty salons, church pews, DMs, and Discord servers, the conversation was the same. Did you hear what he said? And more importantly, did you feel it? People weren't just applauding the comeback. They were reclaiming the memory, the years of hope, the image of a black man walking into the White House with grace and out with even more. Even those who hadn't supported him before found themselves revisiting the record. The calm, the contrast. Because in the face of a passive-aggressive jab dressed in elegance, Barack Obama didn't raise his voice, he raised the bar. And America noticed. But beneath the cheers was something deeper, a lesson, a warning, and a path forward. In the end, it wasn't a shout that shook the country. It was a whisper of truth delivered with unwavering calm. Barack Obama didn't need to belittle or bark to be heard. He didn't take the bait, didn't swing back with venom. Instead, he did something far more devastating. He rose above it and pulled the rest of us with him. Because that's where his real power has always lived. Not in clever comebacks or dominance plays, but in his ability to hold space for the higher road, and to make that road look like the only one worth walking. Melania's comment was designed to cheapen him, to distill years of sacrifice and service into a surface-level swipe. But what she underestimated, what so many underestimate, is that dignity doesn't need to defend itself. It reflects. Obama's response wasn't for her. It was for the millions watching, the young girl with immigrant parents who wonders if she'll ever be seen, the single mother juggling jobs who dares to dream bigger for her children, the teacher, the vet, the activist, the voter who wants to believe politics can still hold purpose. And in that moment, he gave them something better than outrage. He gave them clarity. Because America doesn't just face a political crisis. It faces a moral one, a crisis of tone, of decency, of depth. We live in an era where volume is mistaken for value, where attention is currency and cruelty is rewarded with airtime. But Obama reminded us without ever saying it outright that real leadership isn't about silencing others. It's about uplifting truths. And truth doesn't always come in headlines. Sometimes it comes in pauses, in stillness, in words chosen carefully, not carelessly. What this moment revealed was not just the strength of one man, but the hunger in a nation for something better, for integrity that can't be photoshopped, for character that can't be plagiarized, for leadership that knows the difference between being seen and being remembered. Barack didn't just speak to the country, he spoke for it. And he reminded us that the values we thought had vanished, humility, courage, grace, were still here, quietly waiting for someone to lead with them again. This story was never just about two public figures trading lines. It was about what kind of story we still want to write. Do we reward the spectacle or the substance? Do we settle for sarcasm or stand with those who speak from the soul? Because if Barack Obama taught us anything in those few unforgettable minutes, it's this. Style without principle fades, but dignity echoes. And what happens next is up to us. Melania Trump tried to silence Barack Obama, but all she did was amplify his truth. Because when dignity speaks, even whispers can become thunder. In a world flooded with noise, where insults travel faster than ideas, we need reminders like this. That power doesn't have to be cruel. That truth doesn't have to shout. That the loudest voice isn't always the one we should follow. Barack Obama didn't just clap back. He lifted the conversation. And in doing so, he reminded us of what leadership really looks like. So if this story moved you, if it made you remember what hope feels like, what grace under pressure sounds like, don't let it stop here. Drop a comment below. Tell us what truth you're holding on to. Tell us who taught you to stand tall in the face of doubt. Let your voice echo with purpose. And if you believe in stories that uplift rather than divide, stories that celebrate identity, courage, and clarity, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that style and strength can live in the same breath. Because this isn't just content, this is a movement. A movement to reclaim truth, to reward grace, to remind the world that power and decency are not opposites, they're allies. Barack spoke his truth. Now it's time for us to speak ours. Loud, clear, together.